Hello and welcome to the Really 007 podcast for a very special interview. My name's Rob Parker. I'm joined by John Kell and Christopher Goldie. And we're three sixes, a half of the usual.
A half,
yeah, exactly. Great. I'm a numbers guy. I'm a word guy. Sorry, not a numbers guy. We're half of the Really 007 six. And we're here tonight to speak to someone very special who's got a very interesting role in the world of James Bond. But before we meet this gentleman, please check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all the usual places that you go and get your podcasts. Give us 5 stars on your subscription service of choice, and chat to us on Twitter at Really007pod. Do we have an email address? Really007@gmail.something. Do we do that?
.com.
Excellent. Really007
there it is.
gmail.com. You see, I'm not the most au fait with the intros, so we'll get straight through it. Firstly, how are you, John and Chris? Are you okay?
Yep, very good, thank you. You?
Very good. Very excited to be here.
Excellent stuff. Excellent. Well, I will introduce our guest. And this is very exciting for me because I know a lot of you out there will know my day job as a writer, but whenever I get to speak to someone who has actually been writing in the world of James Bond and not just fan fiction like me, actually allowed the keys to the franchise to go and work in this amazing world, is a very special day. So without further ado, can I welcome Mr. Raymond Benson to the podcast? How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And hello, everybody out in podcast land.
Yes. Well, we do. We have listeners all over the place, and so it's wonderful to share.
So I can say I can't say I've had my 6, but I've had my 3.
Very good.
You can definitely say that. This is usually a point where I'd look to the guys and go, "We got a good one here, guys." Well, firstly, Raymond, how are you today, and where are we speaking to each other from? I'm in Warrington, in the north of England, and you are?
I'm outside of Chicago, in the middle of the United States.
Incredible, absolutely incredible.
It's a little after 2:00 here.
Amazing, and thank you so much for your time. Speaking about, the whole picture of your writing career, if we could do that, but before we got to James Bond, were you always a writer? Just in your heart and in your mind, were you always a writer?
No.
I
was a theater major. I started off, really, I think, as a kid, wanting to be an actor, I thought. And in high school, I was in our drama department, and I did act a lot, and decided I wanted to be in show business of some kind. And after I graduated high school, I went to the University of Texas at Austin and joined the drama department there to be to get my degree in theater. After one semester, I decided acting was for the people who were really talented at it. And I wanted to be a director. I thought I would be better suited as a director. But I was also a musician. I don't know if you knew that. I compose music. I play the piano. I'd always been composing music. So for the next, for the college years and for pretty much 10 years after that, I was a theater stage director and a music composer for theater. After college, I did move to New York City, and I directed stage works there, off Broadway, off Broadway, off, way off Broadway. And I would put music to playwrights' lyrics when they, say, wrote a new musical, and these were performed, and I did that for a long time. But then in the 80s, the 1980s, I'm an old guy. So we're talking about the 70s there. And in the early 80s, I had this crazy idea that I wanted on my bookshelf a book that was, we had already had a couple of books on the Bond movies, the John Brosnan book and the Stephen J. Rubin book. We had, some biographies of Ian Fleming. We had the John Pearson book and some sort of unauthorized out-of-print books. We had a couple of books on the Bond novels, like the Kingsley Amis James Bond dossier, and a few that came out in the '60s and were long gone. I wanted a book that had all of that in one big book, a brief biography of Fleming, a history of the Bond phenomenon, and analyses of all the books and all the movies, all in one place. And there did not exist a book like that. And my friends said, well, you're going to have to write it because they knew I was a big, huge Bond fan since childhood. I was 9 years old when Goldfinger came out on the big screen. And I persuaded my father to take me to see it. And of course, back then, this would have been probably January of 1965 because it didn't open in America until December of '64. And I lived in a small town in West Texas, and the movies didn't come there it took a couple of months. It might have been like February of '65. And then, at that age, seeing something like that on the big screen just, blows your mind. And my libido was kicking in around that time, and it was hot, it was sexy, it was cool, it was Sean Connery was, cool as hell. It was just fantastic. And I was immediately a fan. And I started investigating, well, what else is there? And I learned, well, there were two movies before that. And luckily, about 4 months later, 5 months later, they released the double bill of Dr. No and From Russia with Love. And that came to the big screen. So within about
Wow.
within about 6 months, I saw the first three movies on the big screen. And the paperbacks, the Ian Fleming paperbacks were everywhere at that time. And so I started picking them up, even at 9 years old, and started reading them, even though maybe
Wow.
some of it may have gone a little over my head, but I could get the stories. I was a good reader at the time. I was a very advanced reader. So I read the Ian Fleming books at the age of 9 and 10, and kept up with the series and everything all through the '60s. I was right there in the middle of Bond mania and Beatlemania and the whole British invasion thing. I was just really into it, everything. Uh, Swing in London and all that stuff. I was just, I was a peculiar kid for West Texas. I was not like everybody else. So, in the early '80s, here we are. I'm now in my, late 20s. And I started thinking about this book. What if could I write something like that? I'd never thought of myself as a writer, but I think I knew the material, but I wanted to do a lot of more research into Ian Fleming. Uh, I pitched the idea to a publisher and got a contract to write the book overnight, which is
What?
kind of unusual.
Whoa.
What?
Yeah,
Wow.
but it took me 3 years to do it. I did go to England in 1982, and I met members of Ian Fleming's family and a lot of his colleagues and friends, and I spent time with Ivor Bryce and Ernest Cuneo and Robert Harling, and I met Peter Jansen Smith, who who was his literary agent and ran at the time it was called Glidrose Publications. Now it's called Ian Fleming Publications. Um, I met Kingsley Amis. I met John Pearson. All these people, and it was fantastic. It was just eye-opening and quite the experience as well. So I went, came back, wrote the book. Took a while for it to get published, but finally it came out in 1984 in the United States. It didn't come out in Britain until 1988. But by then I had updated the original version, and so they used the updated version for the text of the British version. So that kind of turned my career sideways. I was still doing theater, but I suddenly was a writer, and the book was nominated for an Edgar Allan Poe Award and all this stuff, and I got a lot of acclaim for it. And I started getting involved with the American Bond Fan Club, and they had a magazine called Bondage. Maybe you were familiar with that.
Yep.
So I started writing
Good.
articles for that. and I became kind of known as this sort of Bond expert, whatever that is. And I would appear at like these conventions and things like that. And Peter Jansen Smith, the guy at Ian Fleming Publications, he and the Fleming family, they liked the book, The Bedside Companion. And we stayed in touch. And I did, little tasks for them every now and then, all through the 80s and early 90s. And this is when John Gardner was writing the books.
Yeah.
I'd visit him when I came to England and stuff.
Can you define tasks a little bit? It sounds mysterious.
I can't. I can't. I probably shouldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were sort of secret tasks.
Cool.
But anyway, well, one of those I can sort of talk about because now it's well known. Is that I wrote a stage play based on Casino Royale. It was an adaptation of Casino, because at the time in the mid 80s they still owned the rights for a stage play of Casino Royale. Now the film rights were owned by Columbia because of the 1967 thing. Eon had no rights to it, so actually Glidrose did own what could be called stage rights. So they commissioned me to write the play, and I actually got paid for it, which is a nice thing.
Always a good thing.
Yeah, and we did a staged reading of it in New York City, off Broadway, and it went very well. But then mysteriously, Glidrose decided not to pursue it, and that's it. That was the end of it. So it's one of those, things that we don't talk about.
what an interesting. I mean, even just by itself, the idea of a Casino Royale musical is
no, not a musical.
Not a musical. Sorry, a stage adaptation.
Serious stage play.
A series, right? I'm so sorry.
Unbelievable.
I guess, yeah.
Very faithful to the book. And when you think about it, Casino Royale is probably the only one of the books that could be a stage play.
Yes,
100%.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, sorry, Raymond, just hearing your story. I mean, I know it's so obvious, but you are just genuinely a fan, aren't you? It's just, I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, you're an incredibly talented guy, but you are like living the dream. This is a Bond fan who makes a Bond book, and it's an inspiration. That's all I'm trying to get at. It's so good.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it was. I was in a unique position. I totally admit it, and I don't take it for granted. But anyway, during this time in the late 80s and early 90s, I got involved in computer games. Totally by accident, because after The Bedside Companion was published, I'd gained a literary agent, and the agent had gotten a call from one developer of early computer games in the mid 80s. You got to remember, this was the infancy of computer games, when Apple IICs were coming into the homes, and Commodores and things like that.
Yeah,
really. I mean, you guys are too young to remember this stuff, but
there's a couple of us going.
This company had a license to do a couple of James Bond games, and my agent, they were looking for a writer. So they contacted this agency that my agent was with, and they said, "Do you know any writers that might want to do this?" And he thought of me. So he called me and said, "Would you be interested in this?" And I said, "Yeah." So I learned on the fly how to write, this user code for text adventure computer games. And, and those, the first ones were very basic text only games where, it tells a story as you play it. It's the kind of, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Infocom games like Zork.
I remember Zork, yeah.
Yeah. They were very popular in the 80s. But they were all text, no graphics. It was, the kind of thing like, you are in a forest. You see a sword on the ground and a path on the east and a path to the west. What do you do? And you type, "Pick up the sword." It says, "You have a sword. Now what do you do?" "Go east," and it unravels a story as you play it and solve puzzles. So I did actually 2 Bond games and a Stephen King game to start off with, and then that just got me more jobs with bigger and better companies up through the mid '90s.
Is this sort of you cutting your teeth on sort of narrative, essentially? Actually learning
Exactly.
the
I
skills.
was just going to say that's how I honed my fiction writing,
Mm.
because the scripts for these things, especially once we got into the '90s with things like Ultima 7, The Black Gate, and Are You Afraid of the Dark, and games like that were massive worldwide bestsellers. The scripts that I would write were pages, that looked like, the kind of phone books from London back in the '80s. Um, so Peter at Ian Fleming Publications, I guess, was following my career like that, and was aware that I was, writing fiction. I had actually written a first novel in the late 1980s, a mystery novel, the proverbial first novel, the kind you put in a drawer and never take out again. But I did let him read it and see, to get, what do you think, Peter? And he had good comments, and didn't think it was terrible, but he agreed with me it should go in a drawer and never come out. But I think he saw that I could not only start a novel with a premise and characters, but I could finish a novel.
Mm.
And that's a big thing, because
Yeah.
I know a lot of people who think I'm going to write a novel, and they'll write one chapter and quit.
Raymond, you are so right. I say this to a lot of people because I'm lucky enough to teach some creative writing, and when anyone who's actually got to the end of a novel, you've done it. You pat yourself on the back. You've got
Yes.
there. Because that's there are so many people who, like you say, start but never finish. And I don't begrudge those people, but I begrudge like how you might have absolute dynamite in there. Finish the darn thing, like
Right.
get it out there. You might have the next poor multi-million-dollar franchise sitting in your head.
Yep. So anyway, he saw that I could do that. Well, then finally, I'm still working at the computer game company, and it's late 1995. It's early November. It's probably the first week of November. GoldenEye is yet to be released in like 3 weeks. He calls me from England, and he says, Raymond, John Gardner has decided to hang up the hat. He's going to retire. And we want to know if you'd like to give it a shot.
Wow.
What did you say? So, I had to keep it a secret for a while, but he wanted me to, I had to kind of audition in a way. I had to write an outline of a story on spec that not only Ian Fleming Publications and the Flemings had to approve, but also the British publisher and the American publisher, because they both had their, claws into this. Once that was done, I had to write the first 4 chapters on spec. Once that was done, then I got the contract and it was announced. And by then it was spring 1996.
Was it a kid in a candy store moment when you were like at the keys in hand and you are keys beneath your fingertips and you're like, I'm writing James Bond here, and I'm gonna like I've been asked to write about that character. Like those must have just been, I mean, how did it feel?
It was terrifying in a way. I mean, I was confident enough that I knew I could do it. I was terrified though, because it was going to be a challenge. It was going to be hard work, and and I'm American, and he said, well, we'll be sure to vet it for any Americanisms that slip in and everything, but you've got to write British. You have to do it as if you're British. I went, oh, okay. So I started coming over to England a lot while I was writing the Bond. I was over there 3 or 4 times a year to soak it all up, and soak up the language. And at first we discussed what direction my books would go. We were thinking series, already. What direction should we go in? Should I continue contemporarily like John Gardner did, set them in the current day? Or should we go back in time, go back to the 50s or the 60s? And then GoldenEye came out, and that was huge. It was a big
Yeah.
hit, and it kind of rebooted the franchise. And Peter said, I think we should stay in sync with the films. And in fact, we want you to make your M a woman. And he said, I think stay contemporary, make your books a little more like the Eon movies, a little more action, a little more humor. And I said, well, that's fine, but I really want to keep my Bond Fleming's Bond. I want him to have all of his vices intact. I want him to still be a drinker, a smoker, a womanizer, all that stuff. And Peter thought, well, it might be anachronistic now, but if you can make it work, fine. And that's how I approached it. I put, what I saw as Fleming's Bond into sort of the Pierce Brosnan era world universe. And that's what my books were.
So when you were thinking of like plot points, obviously like with GoldenEye, that's set very much in its time. Were you kind of scouring kind of like, current affairs, you were trying to plant it just there and then and kind of have that influence?
Yes. Well, basically what I would do I would look at a map of the world and see what hotspots Britain was concerned about.
Mm-hmm.
And once I've pinpointed a spot, then I would do a little research into the history of why it was a hotspot and come up with a storyline based on that. So, the very first book, I knew that if it were published, it would be 1997. And what was the big event that year? It was the handover of Hong Kong.
Yeah.
So, I cleared it with Peter. I said, what if I do Hong Kong? And he said, that sounds great. So I wrote an outline and a storyline based on Hong Kong. I traveled, to Hong Kong and China and Macau to do the research. That was in 96, in spring of 96. And, wrote it all through that year while I was still working at the computer game company. I didn't quit my day job until the book came out, till 0-10 was published in April of 97. And then from then on, I've been a freelance author.
Wow.
And the run, I mean, like, so this is an unheard of 5 years you had where there was, so is it 3, in terms of just Bond we're talking about here, 3 short stories and 9 novels. I know a few tie-ins in that, but
six originals and 3 movie novelizations.
It between 97 and 02.
I count 96 because that's I was all the way through.
When you were working up, but I mean that's just an astonishing run of work in a comparatively short amount of time. I mean, like if you look at 99, you had you had 4 in 99. 2 of them were full novels. Like, it's just crazy.
I know. I was really pulling my hair out that year.
I can imagine. I mean, like, so once you'd done 0-10, was it like, I know you mentioned that you were already thinking of this in terms of series potential, but when did it become like apparent that you were going to be, doing novelizations for the movies as well?
Whoever was the author of record was the one who did the novelizations, which is what John Gardner did, License to Kill and GoldenEye.
Right.
So if I was sitting in the seat, then I would be the one.
Got you.
By spring of 97, they all knew that I could do it. I'd written 0-10. And so immediately after that book was published, I started working on Tomorrow Never Dies because they were filming it. The novelizations had to be into the publisher 5 months prior to publication. So that means I had from about April to June to write Tomorrow Never Dies. The novelizations are quick works.
Oh my word!
Right, not just in the world of James Bond, but I've not met many people who do movie novelizations, and I'm like, I think they can be such fabulous companion pieces to a movie that you might already love, and that flesh out that world even more. But how does it work? I mean, do you get the script, or
yes.
do you get the script?
Eon sent me the script, but as they, because they were filming still while I was writing, they would fax me changes to the script every day. And they were still filming. They were still filming when I finished. So that's why my three novelizations are slightly different from the finished. A little bit, And also I added some stuff to it. I got permission from Eon to, like, say in Tomorrow Never Dies, I added a Wei Lin backstory.
Yes.
What was she doing there in Hamburg? What was her backstory? What brought her there in search of Carver? So I fleshed that out. That wasn't in the script.
Because one of the things that got me kind of reading as a young age was novelizations. There was particularly for films that I wasn't allowed to actually watch. So things like Terminator and Alien that I couldn't watch, I'd buy the novelization. It was probably worse, to be honest with you, obviously with your own imagination. But I always found them, like I collect them whenever I can, because like you say, like Rob was saying, it's such a fascinating artifact of this is what maybe the first early drafts were, and then you've got the influence of the writer, and then obviously you've got the final cut that maybe doesn't quite match it. So I always love going back to films that I'm familiar with and finding the novelization and go, wow, like I say, you get to flesh out those bits where you just don't have either the running time or was caught or was never actually written. And I always loved it. It's like putting meat on the bones for me, novelizations. And there's always like a scene that you're like, this isn't in the film. And you're like, oh, when did this happen? And then I've always kind of loved it. And also the process, like you say, getting that script and how that evolves, because obviously filming a script is very different to writing a novel. So it must have been, like you say, it must have been quite stressful trying to keep up with those constant changes.
Right. Well, they were fun to do, but it was the original novels that really I was put my heart and soul in. And they took a year each, because I would travel to all the locations, and I spent a lot of time, working out the plot and writing it. And
would you say you're sorry, Raymond? I apologize. I'm so excited. I'm so excited. It's just there's questions popping out the top of my head constantly. It's like, so a common question asked. Whenever I find myself talking to an author, is about planning or pantsing. How far do you? How far do you, especially with Bond? I need to remember we are in a James Bond podcast, so especially when it comes to your Bond original novels.
Do you plan plotter or pantser? And that's a good thing, because I belong to several writers organizations, Mystery Writers of America and International Thriller Writers, and the International International Association of Media Tie-in Writers.
Oh wow!
So that's all guys that do novelization, people that do novelization. Cool. Anyway, there's this, we refer to ourselves as either plotters or pantsers, and that is, you either plot beforehand or you just write by the seat of your pants. And I'm a plotter. I'm definitely a plotter. Ian Fleming Publications required an outline before I started.
Right.
That was part of the deal. They wanted to see what I was going to write. So I began by, how Alfred Hitchcock did storyboards before he would shoot a movie?
Yeah.
They were picture. He would draw out the movie that he saw in his head on paper, frame by frame, just about. Well, my outlines are the prose equivalent of a storyboard. They're broken out in block paragraphs in prose, and each block paragraph represents a chapter. What happens in that chapter, plot-wise, story-wise? And that's what I would do. And I would spend a lot of time doing this. I'd work out all the kinks and all the red herrings and the twists and the turns and the obstacles. And I would spend maybe 2 months or more on just a 20-page outline.
Wow.
And so I would get it perfect, so that it becomes the map. It's the guide for writing the book, the blueprint, so to speak. It's like, I look at, writing the novel is building the novel, and you got to have your blueprints to build a building, right?
Yeah.
So it's the blueprints for the novel. It doesn't mean I can't change some things if I'm in the middle of writing chapter 10 and I realize, oh, it would be kind of cool to do this. I can do that. I can change the outline a little bit if I want to. And I've done that, but that's what I do first. And I've done that with all my work ever since, even my own stuff. I admire people who can be pantsers. I mean, I don't know how they do it. Stephen King's probably the most famous pantser. He just sits down and writes. Ian Fleming was a pantser. I mean, he had a good idea of what he was going to do. He had done some research beforehand and done all the sort of legwork. Like, for example, for Diamonds Are Forever, he traveled across America with Ernest Cuneo and went to Las Vegas and did all that stuff and had all that stuff in his head and notes and stuff. But then when he started to write, he didn't have an outline. He just sat down and wrote.
No, that's amazing. So I would imagine then when it came to a novel, to a movie tie-in, the plan is the script, I suppose. That you can always refer back to and that kind of thing.
Right. And I didn't do an outline for the novelizations.
I was going to say, like, that's amazing. So, right. Right. And I hope this is acceptable to say, but but I'd just like to say it while I have the writer in front of me. I thought the Die Another Day novel that you did as the movie tie-in outstripped the film by miles and miles. I thought it was fabulous. Yes. The tie-in novel you did.
Thank you.
So no, it was brilliant, and it was more than a companion piece on this occasion. This was like, so this is what it perhaps could have been like, like that kind of thing. and I have to add at this point that we're people who like the movie. We like the movie.
I don't like to denigrate Eon or anything like that.
I mean, I love, and I'm not asking you to do that. I
love Eon, and I love Barbara and Michael, and I thought working with them was really great. They've been very good to me. But I was at the premiere party for The World Is Not Enough, and I meet Michael Apted, the director, and I say, oh hi, I novelized the movie. I wrote the book of the movie, and he went, oh well, maybe you made sense of it then.
Oh my word! So right, so this past, it's taken us nearly a year, hasn't it, guys? We've been done a deep review dive on Die Another Day, and we get people online sometimes tell us, well, have you looked at the Fleming? Have you gone back to the Fleming? So we introduced the Benson in Die Another Day, our episode. So I kept referring to the Benson while doing this review and saying, well, this is the scene here. Here's the scene how it otherwise could have played out with all that extra backstory and stuff like that. So,
well, Robert Wade and Neil Purvis, they came. It's really them,
Yes, yes.
And my hat's off to them. I did work with Robert during the novelization. I would bounce things off of him. For example, in the movie, Bond gets from North Korea to Hong Kong like that, still wearing the same clothes.
Oh,
how did he do that?
The story. So did you come up with the story of how he got there?
I said, look, this is a novel. You can't just do a jump cut. You have to explain how did he get to Hong Kong? He's been disavowed. He's on his own. He has no money. What's he gonna do? So I have a whole chapter of how he gets to Hong Kong.
And it's one of the coolest Bond chapters ever for me. Like, he goes with nothing to some underground. Is it like underground bar, doesn't he, or underground casino place?
Yeah, something like that. I haven't read it in a long time, so I don't remember all the details.
It's just about Raymond.
He does some sneaky
Bond
stuff.
Thing. He does, yeah. Well, basically, he finesses money and a way to get out of nothing, just his wits. It's the most Bond thing I've read. Oh, such a long time. It's so good. So I mean, like, so oh gosh, right. I've got so wrapped up that I've totally forgotten my own question. Lads, feel free to jump in at any point, but I'm so buzzing. And so we've got 0 minus 10. We've got the facts of death. We've got, obviously, I'll leave the short stories to one side for a moment. High Time to Kill, Double Shot, Never Dream of Dying, The Man with the Red Tattoo. And do you have one that particularly lives in the memory for you?
Well, they're all like children, so you know, I love them all. But if I had to pick a favorite, it would be High Time to Kill.
Right.
You know, that is probably, you know, there, it's a Bond story that hasn't, I don't think it's been done. You know, it's a mountain climbing story. Um, I'd love to see it filmed. You know, it should be filmed.
I'm going to say it should as well.
When you're kind of dealing with this already pre-existing literary world, you know, whether it's the films or, you know, Ian Fleming's kind of work, you've got kind of, have you got carte blanche where it comes to, can I use that character? Can I bring that character into this story, or did you have to kind of get permission, or
No, I just did that. You know, when I would do the outline, if I wanted to use Felix Leiter or Tiger Tanaka, I would just do it. Right. And you know, Peter would read the outline and approve it. So you know, I never had an outline rejected. So they always took it. Yeah.
Did they ever come in and say
they might have suggestions? He might have had some suggestions, you know, here and there. You know, this little bit right here, maybe do this or something like that. You know, we talked a lot about Marc-Ange Draco, what I did with him, and he totally agreed with me that this guy's a bad guy. He was a bad guy to begin with. You know, this makes total sense. That was a little controversial when that book came out.
Really, I love it.
Can I ask a question? Because like when I'm hearing this, your passion just oozes through. You know, you know, you're a Bond fan, and this is a joy for you to do. And you're thinking at it from the perspective of a fan. You're thinking logically about the characters and all the rest of it. And having, you know, such a prolific bibliography in such a short space of time shows just your passion oozing through. But would you say there was any time that you found it difficult in terms of the writing? And
it was always difficult. It was always work.
Really?
Yeah. It was always work. Yeah.
I mean, even the traveling. You know, everybody. You know, I'd say, well, I'm going to France, you know, or Spain to do research, and everybody go, oh, can I carry your bags? You know, that kind of. It was work. It really was work. I mean, I had a great time. I had a great time, and I saw a lot of places I never thought I would see. I met a lot of people that were incredibly interesting and cool, but it was work. I was taking notes. I was taking pictures. I was asking questions. I was making appointments to see people and find out things. And going from here to there and here to there and taking this train and going, you know, within a short amount of time that was finite, you know. So it was not leisurely. No, it was work. But man, I had some adventures. It was.
Like what you're describing sounds very James Bond in itself.
It's very James Bond.
Well, you know, I like to say I was walking in Bond's footsteps. You know, I would
you were making up his footsteps, man.
Stay in his hotels, eat his food. You know, I didn't jump out of airplanes or bed as women, but I ate his food, so that was fun.
It's as close as we'll get, isn't it, Raymond? What about like so after in 2003? I know that you stepped back from the James Bond world, and from then, I mean, your writing career. I tried to count and find everything that you've done, and I just kept going back on myself and finding new things. And your career is storied and huge and ongoing. I mean, just this year, 2023, Sea People, published in the anthology Thrilling Adventure Yarns.
Right.
I mean, you just...
And next week, there's a short story coming out in an anthology of stories inspired by the songs of Elvis Costello.
Incredible,
yeah, it's called the book is called Brutal and Strange. stories inspired by the songs of Elvis Costello. And my story is The Beat
Right.
from this year's model. Yeah.
Cool.
Oh,
So
that is so good.
That comes
if
out
anyone
Monday. Comes out Monday.
comes out Monday, right? We'll make sure we do a shout on Monday.
Yeah, too right.
Yeah. So if you could, I mean, because there is so much, and it's also so much variety. Well, you wrote a pocket essential book about Jethro Tull as well.
I did.
Yeah, I mean, this is just like the variety here is just monstrous. So is there anything outside of the world? If someone else, say just to someone who knows you only from the James Bond books, and you were to say, you know what, like I wouldn't mind someone else reading this of mine because I'm particularly proud of it. What might that be for you?
Well, my latest novel, The Mad Murders of Marigold Way, is right up there, I think. It's won some awards. It's gotten some good notices. It's one of my favorites, and it's wacky. It's a dark comedy that takes place during COVID. It was my attempt to do a Coen Brothers movie in prose.
Amazing.
Nice.
You know how if you watch the Coen Brothers movies, a lot of their movies are about crime, but the characters committing those crimes are so utterly stupid. I think the Coen Brothers make smart movies about stupid people, for smart people. Well, that's what the Madman Murders is. It's about some really stupid people and who try to commit some crimes, and all the while COVID is going on around them, and it takes place in my neighborhood.
Oh, really?
I set it in my hometown. I fictionalized it, but there's a lot of truth in this book.
It sounds absolutely amazing. It just got added to my Christmas list, Raymond. So I literally clicked add to list on thingy this. So
other than that, I would say my Black Stiletto series. That's really my magnum opus. I think. It's the five books that are. It's really kind of like Harry Potter in that it's one big story told in 5 different books. That are all linked and tell a complete character arc.
Amazing.
So the Black Stiletto is probably my favorite thing that I've written.
Excellent.
I think it's quite obvious that you're also a big cinephile, and you're referencing. Obviously, not obviously people can't see this, but you're a Kubrick fan as well, which I'd obviously spotted.
Yeah.
Has his work influenced your writing over the years?
Absolutely. I one of my little sort of side jobs in the last 15 years was teaching film history at a nearby college.
Wow.
So yeah, I'm very much a cinephile. I'm a film historian. I lecture every month. I have been for 20 years, in at libraries and campuses and things like that on film on history. And I write for Cinema Retro magazine. Do you know Cinema Retro? That's run by Dave Worrell and Lee Pfeiffer.
Yeah.
I've been with that magazine since the first issue. I've always had a column. So yeah, I'm very much into movies and music and theater.
You're a storyteller. You're a fan of stories, and you're a storyteller. It's just absolutely wonderful. Can I ask, what are you working on at the moment, or is it top secret?
Well, in a way, it is secret. I've been for the last year and a half. I've been ghostwriting.
Have you?
I have been. I've done some of that. It kind of goes along with the tie-in work. I've done other novelizations. Of video games like Splinter Cell and Metal Gear Solid and things like that. But every now and then I'll get a job where it's ghostwriting, where you write the stuff and somebody else puts their name on it, but you get paid a lot. So
he worked with John Milius.
It can be very lucrative. And you would be surprised what all is ghostwritten out there. I mean, just about any celebrity biography that's supposedly written by the celebrity is more than likely not written by that celebrity. So
and I would imagine more non-disclosure agreements than you know what to do with.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'm quite familiar with the with the verbiage in an NDA.
Yes, yes. I must admit, I'm still at the point in my career where my ghostwriting work, Raymond, is more lucrative than my actual work under my own name. So,
well, that's the case. That's true.
Yeah.
I mean, my tie-in work, my novelization work, my ghostwriting work does pay better than my own original work. I mean, I've done okay with my original stuff. I'm not, thank you very much, but it does pay pay a lot more.
Yes. About Bond, if we could just, we talked about you as a writer and about the career and everything like that, and that magical period that you were the literary voice for Bond. You were the Benson. You are the Benson. But what about, like, who's your favorite Bond?
You mean the actor?
Yeah. Who's your favorite Bond?
Oh, well, I've always said there's Sean Connery and then there's everybody else.
Okay, cool. There's no argument here on that one.
You talk to just about any Bond fan, it kind of depends on what their age is and what their first movie was and when they got into it, and that's usually their favorite. My son Goldeneye was his first movie, and he really likes Pierce Brosnan, although he has come to appreciate the earlier stuff, and now I think he's like me. He appreciates Connery the best. But I know people who Roger's their favorite, or Pierce, or even Daniel Craig. I know people who George Lazenby's their favorite.
Yeah.
But Connery was the first guy I saw. He was the guy I was living with as Bond for many years.
Yeah.
And to me, he was. I argue that without him, if Dr. No had not been a success, we would not be here today talking.
I totally
Absolutely.
agree. Totally
so
agree.
true. So true.
Yeah, you can trace everything back to that moment.
Yeah, 1966, Connery was the #1 box office star. And people today, the younger generation, they don't appreciate that. They don't really understand how big it really was in the 60s. I mean, Bond has always been big, but in the 60s, that was the Star Wars. That was the pinnacle of franchise movie making. And there were a lot of imitations, but nothing as successful or had the quality of the Bond films in the 60s. And I will always think of, especially the first three as the most significant, and most important Bond films of the entire franchise.
I don't think anyone in their right mind could argue against that. I truthfully don't think they could. But
well, you see all these rankings, people ranking their Bond films, and somebody puts Octopussy at #1, and I'm going, what's wrong with you?
Whoa!
I
nearly spat my drink everywhere, Raymond.
I'm gone.
I like Octopussy too. It's fine. It's fine. It's a nice little romp. But as far as what Bond movies are you going to put in a time capsule to open up 100 years from now that represents what a Bond movie is? And I would put the first three, because they were the ones that they were original. They totally created every little element that gets repeated and repeated and repeated and repeated.
I would completely agree. And I think if you don't have the sheer potency, filmic potency of those three films, you don't have everything after that. You don't. It's a franchise that just gets like, hey, those were some nice movies, and that it dies there a death. Again, right. So another pop quiz. Favorite Fleming novel?
From Russia with Love. Although a close second would be Dr. No. Because From Russia with Love ends with that cliffhanger. I'm not sure if somebody said, I'm only going to read one Fleming book, which one should I read? I would be hesitant to say From Russia with Love because of the way it ends. I would probably tell them to read Dr. No. And because those two together, I think, are the epitome of Fleming's work. I love Honor Majesty's Secret Service a lot. I'd probably put that as #3. But there's several that I really love.
As I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm going to put you on the spot.
I'm sorry, I've been doing that for.
I thought I was on the spot. I wouldn't be here.
I'm so sorry, Chris. I'm sorry.
Which
Raymond.
is obviously, in terms of the film series, I think it's fair to say it's a clean slate now, a fresh start for whatever comes with it. So, does Raymond Benson have a elevator pitch for the Eon production? Which way do we go?
Yeah, well, it's what a lot of people are suggesting, but they probably won't do it, is to go back to the 50s and do a period Bond. They won't. I don't think they will. I mean, I don't know. I don't like to speculate what Eon will do.
So you would like to see that? You'd like to see?
I would personally, yeah, I would like to see that. Yeah,
to kick it off again back there.
Yeah. I mean,
what would excite you about going back to the 60s and doing that? What would it be about that?
Well, it would be closer to what Fleming wrote, I think. It would, capture that period of time, which was what the original books were. Of course, they wouldn't be able to do all the product placement and things like that.
No,
that's why they won't do it. I don't think. I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do.
Well, I imagine smoking would be a big issue as well.
Well, you see, there are movies that take place in that time period, and people smoke. So I don't know. It's it's a whole new world.
But if the phone rang, would you answer the call?
Well, it does. It continues to ring because 0-10 just got.
Yes, of course. Yeah,
absolutely.
We should talk about that. Yeah, in fact, let's end on a great big plug for 0-10 because it's been beautifully repackaged.
Yeah, I was really pleased with it. This year is the 70th anniversary of Casino Royale, and Ian Fleming Publications decided to also relaunch 0-10, Colonel Sun, and the John Pearson biography of 007
Amazing.
at the same time. Yeah, so we launched them basically at the Pinewood Studio event on October 29th. All 3 books, and it was great. Charlie Higson was there, Kim Sherwood was there, and Steve Cole was there, as well as Nicholas Shakespeare and Andrew Lycett, who were also interviewed. We had Thomas Wheatley and Madeline Smith there to read excerpts from the books.
Incredible.
Lovely. It was a wonderful day. It was really a nice event, and hats off to Gareth Owen and his team for doing that.
Amazing. If I could only just echo what's been said, or your passion is just shines through. And also, I've spent the whole hour, my cheeks hurt from smiling. I've enjoyed this so much. So, thank you so very much, Raymond, for coming and spending time with us.
Quite welcome.
I know you mentioned before that you'd like to go back to the time of the Fleming. I'd like to go back to the time of the Benson, if you don't mind, please.
Get the Benson.
Get the Benson. So thank you so much for your time. And we'll certainly be shouting about your upcoming works and the re-release of 0-10 as well. And just thank you so very much.
Yeah,
well, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
To talk to you, honestly, love your books, love your work, love the stuff you did with Bond, love the stuff you've done elsewhere. It's just a great pleasure to talk with you. Thanks so much, man.
Yeah.
You're welcome. Yeah. All right. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Raymond.
You can hear loads of our other episodes on iTunes, Spotify, and our YouTube channel, where we have interviews, special episodes, and reviews of all the Bond films. Simply search Really 007 Pod, and you should find loads of weird and wonderful content.